Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. We're rolling along. There's some events coming onto the calendar for 2026. So
I was gonna say we just finally took our own advice. Every year around November, December, we're telling everyone as you set your goals for next year, make sure that you sit down with your partner, with your family, with your boss, whoever. Okay, it's a little weird if you like walk into your office, boss's office, and are like, "Hey, can we talk about my goals?"
I don't know. Some people do it.
I think it's important.
I think just letting them know you're going to be gone for a week in August.
Yeah, but probably it's not like a cute fireside chat kind of situation.
Right. Well, part of the thing for us, I did have one athlete actually was like, so you're not taking your own advice. And I was like, well, I mean, I know the type of events I'm doing. I just haven't chosen like the actual events because we have to sit down and do this. What else is going on in life? So I feel like I was taking my advice. It's not like I was not training or anything, but yeah, we had delayed
booking things like.
Well, we hadn't chosen any events, honestly. We didn't have one event chosen for 2026. So I think we're closer to that. I don't think we've registered, but I'll try and get some of that crossed off this week as we confirm that we can actually get to these places and that there isn't conflicts. But yeah, for us, it's sort of that when are things happening work-wise? What other clinics and so forth are we doing? What books are you releasing? And these types of things. And then when you're racing versus when I'm racing as well as a consideration. So yeah, it's lots of moving parts, which I think is true of most people's lives.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the older we get, the more of a Rubik's Cube it becomes between family. And I'd say more of a Rubik's Cube in that also there's a lot of unknowns that can come up. So I guess not a Rubik's Cube. A Rubik's Cube if the colors just keep changing on you. I don't know. Because, yeah, now we're at an age where stuff just gets added to the calendar and it isn't really things you can plan for. And obviously we are not alone in this. I talked to all of my friends that are in the same age in their 40s and everyone's contending with the same stuff. So apologies if we've ever made goal setting and picking your race calendar sound like an easy thing to do. It is not.
Yeah. And I mean, I do think like the pushback would be that the calendar's always going to fill and there's always going to be these like other urgent things as well. So I have heard from a number of athletes that they put that event, you insert your big event or small event, but you put it on the calendar now because inevitably work and family are going to have things. And so if you can get it on there early, it's not a competition, right? It's not, but like I do hear that is a practical thing that like the sooner you get like or not even every, but like in July, I am doing this like Saturday event and like I would like this protected at all costs, knowing that like things do disrupt these things. But I have heard that that's a very important thing to do when these calendars and lives are busy.
Well, and I've certainly had to come to terms with, I alluded to it a few times, my mom has some medical stuff going on right now, and the temptation for me, I think, is to try to keep our calendar as clear as humanly possible because I never know like what's happening or when things are happening or if I'm going to need to go to New Jersey for any kind of extended period or anything like that. And it's kind of occurred to me in recent weeks that is just not how life can keep going. Like I can't just keep trying to keep my calendar as clear as possible. So yeah, some stuff that we sign up for may not get raced, right? Like it may, hopefully you can refund or pass the race bib to someone else or something, but sometimes you're not going to win that. But I'd rather, I think, sign up and assume that things are going to go forward rather than sit in this purgatory of like, I shouldn't sign up because maybe something will happen.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think it's good to still register to support the events, but also to keep you like, I know a lot of athletes, like once they're signed up, there's like a new level of, you could call it fear, but we could also call it motivation to do the work. And this is the time of year where people are starting to knuckle down a bit more. Maybe they've been training consistently, but now stuff's, they're just a bit more consistent. There's maybe an extra day of bike in there. Maybe there's a bit more intervals in there or a bit more attention to the intervals in there, which we'll talk a bit about today with today's questions as well. But yeah, I do think it's still correct to at least register for your main one or two events. Even, of course, there's always going to be something that disrupts stuff, but I think that's mostly correct that you make that bet and that investment.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of events, February 6th, I'm going to be at Joyride. They're bringing back the Women's Day, so it's Friday, February 6th. They're calling it She Rides at Joyride 150 in Markham, Ontario. So if you're in the GTA, it is a super
It's great,
fun
and
event.
it is across a few days, but there's sort of like a main one day. Oh, I thought I saw something like Friday and Sunday there was like discounted tickets, so you could make a weekend out of this. I'm just saying, like in the past, we have had people who have even flown in or driven up from different places near Toronto. Near is in quotes, but driven up to Toronto or from wherever they have to get to it. So it is sort of a worthwhile weekend that you could spend the whole weekend at the park if you wanted, or do other stuff around Toronto. There's lots of other stuff to do in the area.
For sure. So we'll include a link to that in the show notes. And the other announcement I have is the Mirror Diaries, Book 1, Finding Grace by Vanessa Kuhlbeck, a researcher about all things body image, self-compassion for young women, especially young women athletes. That book is now out with Strong Girl Publishing. I'm so excited. We have an accompanying workbook. So if you know any middle grade girls, so that like 5th to 8th grade-ish range, who could just maybe use a little bit of dose of confidence, could work on their body image, need to work on their self-compassion, self-talk, all that kind of stuff. This is a fantastic resource. We actually had a girls hockey team read it as a team book club, and then did a book talk with the author, and it was super cool. The girls loved it. The girls sort of they were telling her they're already using the exercises in the book.
Nice.
So we sort of snuck a lot of research on body image and self-compassion into the book. So it's not just it's a cute story, it's a cute journal, but it's also this very research-based way of bringing that information to a younger audience in a way that they can actually interact with it. So
Now, you mentioned these sort of book talks or book clubs. That's something that was Strong Girl, your business, and all the different books and different authors there. That is sort of something, if someone had a soccer team or a girl guides group or something, they could reach out, they could check out the website, and there is a spot there about sort of book talks. And
exactly, yeah. All of our authors do different book talks. We just did one with the Shred Girls with Kate Courtney of She Sends, 2-time mountain bike world champion. You might have heard of her. She came on and did a book talk with a bunch of Shred Girls, but all of our authors also have both book club type things, but also can do talks, whether it's nutrition, whether it's Misha Powell talking about the Olympic experience and being a track and field athlete and all that kind of stuff.
And this is virtual, or some have been in person as well. Yeah, we can do that still as well. Yeah.
So yeah, lots of fun stuff going on over there. Of course, you might have heard our Marley Blonsky's book, The Ragtag Best Friends Bicycle Club, is also available for pre-order. Tons of really cute merch with that.
And then is it coming out at Sea Otter?
Coming out at Sea Otter.
And part of our planning is that we're planning, you're going to be at Sea Otter, I think, either way. But we're planning on heading out to Sea Otter is sort of nice. So if you will be at Sea Otter in April up in Northern California, I guess it's Northern California, we might see you there.
Perfect. Okay. I think we should get into our questions. We're talking ERG. We're talking FTP. We're just talking all the acronyms.
Molly's
today.
favorite topics.
My favorite topic.
So yeah, ERG tends to come in like waves. I feel like I hadn't gotten grumpy about it or talked about it for, I don't think we talked about it last year very much, but maybe I'm just forgetting. Maybe it is seasonal when people go indoors. That would be logical.
Well, let's start by, for anyone new to the podcast, new to training, we're talking about ERG mode on the trainer. So what is it? Where do you find it? How do you set it? What is why would someone use it? Why does it exist if we're about to rant about why you shouldn't use it?
Sure. So ERG, there's a technical term for it, but ERG is sort of like this mode or setting. Some people call it a power setting, where it's sort of the computer or the device you're using. This relates to like an ergometer that you might use in like a ski ergometer or a rower. It relates to some of those bikes you might see people using in VO2 max tests that are sort of setting the power output, and they're forcing the power output. And that's the idea with ERG, is that the computer, the bike, the gadget is going to enforce the power. That sounds like harsh, but it is relevant, that like it is making you do 200 watts if that's what it thinks you should be doing based on the workout or whatever. And then your only job as an athlete, and in a lab setting, they'll actually often say like you fail if your cadence drops, your RPMs, how fast you're pedaling, if it drops below a certain number, like it's the end of the test or whatever. Now at home, you can do whatever you want, but your only job is to keep that cadence up and sort of stable.
Cadence. 3 RPMs.
Right. And so there isn't necessarily a wrong answer, but the lower it goes, many people have experienced this where the erg mode will lock down because you keep backing off your cadence to try and find relief. But then it says, no, you must do 200 watts. So it sort of like applies more resistance. And then you will back off again. And then eventually your cadence is 0 and it's like locked itself.
And you're just doing leg presses at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
now,
you know what? Frankly, we haven't ever talked about this, but if we have talked about like cheap ways to add strength training or add weight to your strength training setup at home.
Yeah.
I'm going to argue, just throw it in erg mode and don't pedal, and you can just do all of your leg presses.
Well, a diversion is there's actually like Canadian researchers with our track program, and I'm not sure how much this is secret Canadian information, but I do believe there's published studies now on this using isometrics like on a bike. So basically they I think they chain the crank essentially so that it won't move. And I think they actually built like a specialized bike for this, but they just do isometrics where you just act like you're going to pedal as hard as you can.
Of course they built a specialized bike for it instead of just putting the brakes on.
Yeah. Well, some of these people are really strong. I don't know if there's like a brake that can contain them. But apparently it's been very beneficial.
So there you go.
Yeah.
There's their one use for erg mode.
Just lock it up.
Weight training.
So some people, when they start training, this is all they know. So this might be news that there's even another way to ride an indoor bike. I see these people weekly where like, well, what do you mean there's another way? I have to turn on Zwift and use erg mode. What do you mean? Right? There's another way to ride indoors. And then other people don't even know what we're talking about. Like, of course.
If you don't know what we're talking about, just keep it that way is going to be the TLDR.
So these are people who maybe used fluid trainers, dumb trainers, rollers in the past where you would get on and maybe there was like a resistance knob or something, some sort of thing you could set on the thing to give you like a different gradient or slope effectively. Like the hill you're virtually riding up is steeper. And so it's giving you more resistance. There's more resistance to a roller spinning around. And that could be electric or fluid or magnetic in the past as well. And then you could shift the gears on your bicycle to make it easier or harder, but the wheel would move slower in effect, right? And just like outdoors, really, it's very similar to outdoors where there's more resistance when we get into sand or when we go up a hill or into a headwind, there's resistance and we can use our gears to adjust how many watts effectively we're putting out. So it's a different, and we can adjust our cadence as well to change that. So we control the power and the cadence and we do everything, and there's just a set resistance. And so those are sort of the other modes. And then there would be a third mode now, really, that a lot of these virtual environments, your Zwifts, your Training Peaks Virtual, your Ruvies would be like sort of the top ones, where we have a virtual world we're potentially riding in, and there's virtual hills and downhills and headwinds and drafting. And so we can ride this terrain mode, they call it, or like a virtual sim mode where it's simulating this thing. And so many of us are paying for this virtual world, and there's an option where you actually interact with the world, where there is a virtual hill, a headwind, a drafting, and you have to shift your gears to interact with the world. You have to perceive what's going on and then take action. Perception and action, you're coupling those two things, right? This is what when Rob Gray was on talking about constraints-led approach, which I love. My coaching philosophy is largely like moving and in this direction of where we're using the environment. It's really a fantastic thing that we can go into these virtual worlds. So what I've been trying to push people, and why we're talking about this today, is to venture out from this erg mode, and on some of your workouts, maybe your endurance workout, you go for a ride in the virtual world where it's not in the erg mode where it's set you at a stable 200 watts for that 2-hour ride you're doing, but rather you're riding 60, 70 kilometers in this virtual world. You're going around this world, or on your time trial day, maybe you do Alp to Zwift and you climb 1,000 vertical meters and you're actually interacting with the world. So we've been trying to really push people where if you're paying for these virtual environments, you actually go into them versus being in this weird thing where you're essentially just watching a movie. Like if you just put YouTube on and watched a head cam of riding up a hill and then did erg mode, it would be the exact same. Like it doesn't change based on the thing you're seeing. So that's what we've been trying to push, is just like, if you're going to use these things, like try and use the tools in different ways so that you're getting different stimulus and really letting your body adapt to these different situations.
Yes, because it turns out your bike does not go into erg mode during an IRL time trial or climb or race or whatever.
Right. So then why is this even a concern? Is like, when you're riding your bike outside, and the thing is, I deal with people that are going to ride bikes outside and probably off-road, gravel, cyclocross, mountain bike. So there's a lot of variability. There's a lot of thinking required. You need to be shifting. There's all these things. So the question is, for in Canada, it's like 6-7 months where this is going to be hard to do outdoors. So why wouldn't we be more close to what we want outside when we're doing this training? So that would be the first thing, is that like we want to sort of simulate outdoors if we can. Why not? Not all the time. There's space for something that's more isolated, but we would want to do that. The second piece is that with ERG, a lot of times what it's doing is it's taking like the average of a zone. We've talked a lot about zone 2. We've talked about these different intervals and stuff you might do. And so there's always a big wide range. I often say like zone 2 is actually like 57 to 76%. It's like 20% of your threshold. So this could be a lot of watts that like potentially could be good watts for you to do zone 2 at.
I was going to say, so that's between like 30 and 40 watts difference.
Well, depending on what your threshold is. But yeah, if you, like your standard person may be between say 150 and 250 watts, probably grabs a lot of people's thresholds. And so like, yeah, it's like, it could be a lot of watts, right? And so day to day, depending on the heat, how much fatigue you have, how you're fueled, what the workout the day before was, the appropriate load for your body could be different. And even during the workout, the body likes to cycle through this pedal stroke to pedal stroke, but then also just minute to minute to have a little bit of variety in there and where it does wave a little bit. So I try and push people where it's like, let it just be this more manual mode where you can select for moment to moment what the exact load is. And people say, well, that isn't going to be perfect, but it's the thing that is that the ERG's just picking the average and holding that one number. And so to be sure that one number is the perfect number versus your body choosing that, incorporating a bit of feeling, perhaps a bit of heart rate, that's a weird gamble to say that like this one number that's the average of this arbitrary zone that we've set that may not be set accurately is the correct load for every minute of your training for an entire year, right?
When put like that, it doesn't really make sense, does it?
No, versus like just hitting more of that power zone, like more of it, but then also letting your body solve the problem in the way that it is feeling that is appropriate. And so people will get really upset that, oh, the power moved around a lot, but I often will, almost without fail, I'll then take a screenshot of the workout. We'll overlay the zone that they were, let's say it was zone 2, it was an endurance ride. And it's so close to being what they think perfect is. It just in the second to second, it's like power does jump around a bunch. But when you look at the whole workout, it's almost, I would say I can think of like 2 times when someone needed to work on just being a little steadier. But usually people are close enough and they get even better at it the more and more they do it. And then the relevant thing is that when you go outside and you have to do this zone 2 training or your interval training, to Molly's point, there is no ERG mode outdoors. You need to motivate the power yourself. You need to know how to shift and adjust your cadence. So when you've done this in the isolated environment of indoors, even when we do this in like a simulated Zwift or Training Peaks virtual ride where there are fake hills, it's still so controlled and there's virtual gears. There's all these tricks to make it even more steady and simple. Outdoors is way more chaotic. But people train outdoors all the time. Remember that most of the pros only train outdoors. There's that Pogača interview that everyone talks about and emails me about. He said like, oh, I just don't ride indoor trainers, right? So to say that like indoor trainers are perfect and that ERG is perfect, that's like a jump to assume that when all the pros don't do it.
Absolutely.
Unless they're paid by Zwift. Then they're paid by Zwift.
All right. Love it. Okay. Now that rant's over.
Well, I just want to make sure. Did we get all the reasons here that like the ERG would be like problematic?
Probably not, but
Okay.
I think you hit the major ones.
Yeah, I think so. So like the variety, I think just even the engagement. That's the other thing I see is a lot of people will just get really bored. So they'll have 3 screens and you might still have 2 or 3 screens to watch a movie or whatever. But when you do engage with these virtual environments, like it is much more engaging when you do have to shift and react and maybe hop on a wheel or something like this, right? There is some of the game of the aspect like is positive and does get you more engaged. But we want to just be careful that like we're using the tool for what it's worth. And I always say like you're still allowed to use ERG if there's a workout you think is better that way, or some people are just really like have a lot of brain. That was the other thing, was the brain stuff and Scott Fry's stuff. So a lot of people do have a lot going on in their lives. And if ERG is the only way to get you on that bicycle, that is 10 times better than not. That's like 1,000 times better than not riding. So just go on and it can be gentle. That's fine. But the other aspect that really has convinced me in this last year is the 2 episodes you've done now with Scott Fry, who talked about the brain training. And so, yeah, I bet you it's going to be like a little bit of thinking for you to get on there and do 200 watts and keep it steady and find a gear and deal with the fact that, like Peter told you to ride in Zwift, but now you're going down a hill in Zwift during your intervals. But all that thinking and clicking around on the computer sounds a lot like the experiments that Scott talked about, where they would fatigue people mentally, having to say like red and blue and pick colors on the screen, and then do their work, right? And so to me, this is preparing us for when we get out into those group rides and we've become fatigued, mentally fatigued, and we have to make a decision to go or not go, or to take this line or that line to execute a skill. I just think it's going to be a way better result. So,
all right, I love it. I love it. Okay, before we get into FTP, a quick word from our sponsors over at Payable. So Payable is the easiest way, only way, to take payments within a Google form. So you just use the Payable add-on, and within 10 minutes, your Google form is up, running, and you can actually take payments, whether it's for Girl Guide cookies, jersey orders, t-shirt orders, club memberships. Say you're running a women's gravel camp in April.
April 26th, we're running a gravel camp in the Mansfield area. Let's say we were doing that, and we wanted to collect your name and maybe a little bit of funding for this camp, and we could do that all with a Google form. So we could find out all about you, your experience, your name, your phone number, and then, collect payment all in that form, and then you'd be registered for this great gravel camp.
Hint, hint. Coming soon. But yeah, it's honestly just the easiest way. If you don't want to have to set up a whole website, a whole web shop, deal with all of the fees, subscription fees, charges, all that kind of stuff, Payable only makes money when you do, and their fees are significantly lower than most of their competitors. You can find out more over at payableapps.com/athlete and get even more deals. And you can also see our favorite templates to get you started. All right, with that, back to our regularly scheduled programming, setting FTP to get started indoor training. Now, do you want to combine these two questions, or do you want to start with that one?
The other one was like a follow-up, I think.
The other one is setting FTP when the platforms don't agree on it. So
yeah, that one's more niche. I mean, they're so related. So like some people don't know what it is, and they're just trying to get started training. I've had a lot of beginner people, sort of like first smart trainers, first cycling training plans coming this year. And then the more advanced one is these people who have like 3 or 4 apps they're doing. What do you remember what these apps? So there's Trainer Road, of course, but then what is this? The other ones like Strava based stuff.
Well, this specifically says like Trainer Road, Xert or XERT, Garmin, Intervals.icu.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Training Peaks does it. Zwift does it. My Whoosh does it. Ruby does it. Like all of these things have their own FTP test or their own like when you plug your data in. They're calculating it all in slightly different ways.
Yeah, which are all sort of the same thing, like most of them anyhow, I should say. Xert and some of the other ones are like a little different, but yeah, they're just trying to give you this threshold, and this threshold is sort of this like mysterious thing. It's really this like steady state power you can push for say 30 to 60 minutes. You'll see they say quasi steady state. There's a formal definition there, but the idea for most people getting started is like indoor training, it's just setting the resistance that you're going to be against. So I always try and say like it's the setting for the resistance. It's not you. It's not like anything that magical.
Well, and we should say FTP stands for functional threshold power. And I think functional often like kind of gets overlooked. We just think of FTP as our threshold, but I would argue the functional in the term is actually a really important to like almost, even if it's not exactly what the scientific definition of it is, I think functional is actually the most important part of that. It's just a number to put into your program so that it can set everything else. It's for function. It is not a reflection on you as a person, as a human. It does not, your worth is not determined by this functional threshold power.
Yeah, and that was, I guess they were trying to say, like, this isn't lactate threshold or anaerobic threshold or respiratory threshold or any of these other things you could associate that are basically in the same spot.
Just a practical number to plug into your data.
And that a lot of times it would be based on a field test, meaning that you would do maybe a 20 or a 30 or a 60-minute time trial or a 40-kilometer time trial and see what the average power was. Now, increasingly, people don't like doing longer efforts to get the number. Which is sort of the easiest way is to do a 20 or 30 minute and take around 95% of that. And that's the setting. So the short answer is like to set it. That's what I would suggest you do. But a lot of these systems have tests that are shorter or maybe like a ramp or a step test where they gradually build you up. And those work okay too. So the quick answer to set your threshold would be to just first workout you do is just go through the system's tests. So if Zwift says like do one of these tests, then pick one that seems the least depressing to you and hard. And you can always go through, like, there's no risk in setting it too low. So also go through and like, I really have had great success saying like, this is an 8 out of 10 effort, 20-minute time trial. And most people will pace pretty well. And then towards the end, they'll see the finish line and they'll go a little harder. And whatever that number is just like a great number. Again, because we talked about the zones are so wide that it really just doesn't matter. So whatever the result is, use that for the first month. And then the next month you can try and beat that test. And that's a great feather in your cap. You've improved. So that's fantastic. And away you go. So I think that's like the main thing is to use like one of these like tests to get a sense of what roughly like your power would be. And that's probably like the easiest way to get going.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Now, what about when the platforms don't agree?
Well, I try and tell people you got to pick a system. So you can always, I'm trying to think of a good analogy in life, but it's all sort of like what data has gone into this thing and what formula they're using. And they should mostly agree, but of course there's going to be a difference. And it just, most people just don't have, a lot of times what I'll see is these are the people that don't have the 20 to 30 to 40 to 60 minute, and they just don't have that much data or experience. So a lot of times it's like the main thing is that you need to get in there and train consistently. And the workouts are going to give you a great feedback on like, is this a reasonable threshold? If you fail workouts, like it means that the threshold setting is set too high. So lower it down. But like over time, you should find that like you're able to, as Molly sort of even alluded to, no, maybe it was in the last episode we recorded, but you've alluded in the past to the idea that like eventually you start creeping your power or your paces up in the zone. And as you start exceeding the zone, that's a great sign that the threshold has actually, you could move the setting up because it's too easy for you now, right? If a workout's way too easy, if you go in there and it says 100 watts and you can easily just pedal away at 200, then that's like, it's just set way too low. And vice versa. If it's asking for 400 watts and you can do 200 watts, that's going to be way too hard. So you need to really lower it down so that you can get that sort of appropriate load.
Yeah, and just a reminder, like we said in the last question about erg mode, like the zones are wide, right? Most zones we're talking between 20 and 30 watts wide.
Sure.
So if your zones are so far off from platform to platform that like they don't overlap at all, then yes, there's clearly just like a problem in one of those settings. There's some bad data somewhere.
And WKO is great. I would imagine Exert is pretty good, where they will show you, like Marco Altini from HRV for Train talks about this, where your system should really tell you like how the goodness of fit of the curve or how good your data is. So Marco's app for HRV will always tell you like, is the data from this reading good or not? So even though he uses the fingertip on the camera, which sounds like it shouldn't be accurate, he tells like how valid is the file, and it actually will flag it and say, don't record this. It was a horrible recording for a heart rate. So similarly, like when people come and they have these like inaccuracies, it's because there's usually like big spikes of data. Like sometimes a power meter will accidentally register 2000 watts or like that one day for some reason it was just reading 500 watts and you averaged 500 watts for 4 hours. And people will just leave that in the pool. Well, of course, it's going to throw off your power data. So you need to clean that up. This is the garbage in, garbage out. So these models, which are not the real life, they're just modeling what the power might be given what you've done in the past, can only know what you've told them. So if you just give them crappy data or incomplete data, it's going to be a worse forecast. It's not going to, maybe it's right twice a day, but it's not going to be perfect. And then again, if you haven't given it data that's meaningful, i.e. these like maximal efforts across the power duration, so sprint, VO2 sort of like 5-6 minute power, 12, 20, 60. And if you don't have these because you haven't raced much, you haven't done a lot of interval training, you haven't done tests,
haven't uploaded that data to that specific platform.
Yeah, it's locked away in Strava somewhere, and you're never going to get it back out of it. So, well, you can export them individually, but again, now you're not going to do everything. So, yeah, you just have to get in and train, and that's the ultimate thing. Is the people who end up with like these multiple systems, it's like, you're spending hours doing that you should be spending, just get in and actually train. Like, you got to put in the hours, right? And that's usually the thing. And you see like a difference where there's people who will go and put in hours and hours and hours without actually pondering why they're doing it or what they're doing. And then there'll be the other side of the equation where it's like way too much time thinking about what they're doing and not just getting in and doing it and learning that way. And then ideally we would get there in the middle somewhere and maybe have a coach, sort of outside, sort of helping with that analysis and sort of cleaning up that data and making sure that you're spending your time wisely, right? But for most people, you got to get in there and learn about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. All right. I love it.
Okay, FTP. I think that's fair enough. I was trying to think, with FTP, if there was like a way that you could say, just safely start at this number, but it's like so hard to say, like, for women start at this number, and if it's like so low that it's so easy, then just bump it up another 10 watts, and then in a week you would know your threshold. You could probably do something like that, but I don't know.
No, I mean, yeah, I guess like whatever power number feels comfortable to you, assuming you've like done enough on a smart trainer or with a power meter that you have any kind of like comfort level with the power number, pick whatever feels comfortable to you and try it. Like, pick a number you can do, try it, and then start bumping it up would be the only way I could think of.
Well, and that's it. Like, a lot of folks just don't know what they could possibly do. Like, what doing 20 minutes at this power, like, yeah, sure, I could do 400. And you're like, I don't know. Have you tried that? So you sort of got to get in and try. But I guess the way to back it out would be to look at that zone 2 range and say, like, is that power that you can ride at for hours or not? And if that's going to be challenging, then like lower it down till that zone 2 is like easy looking. But again, if you don't have any basis for that, you probably are you're going to have to just try something like the Zwift ramp test or the 20-minute test. And again, just don't make the first one the best one of your life. Just make it a 8 out of 10, and then you're close, right? Yeah, it's going to be a little, your zones are going to be a little easier, but remember, the zones always have the range to go a little higher than they're suggesting, right? There's always that skew point.
I always think it's better to, set it so that you can nail your workouts than set it so that every single workout is fighting for your life or failing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that shouldn't be the situation for sure. Yeah, it should be definitely like doable. Everything should be like pretty doable.
This is where I just love perceived exertion. Just...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is where the ERG thing gets complicated because it like has to be like perfect. It's like if the workout's not built perfectly so that average is good, and your zones aren't set perfectly so that the average is like perfect.
But that's not even that wouldn't even be the perfect way to set up the workout. That would actually be a terrible way to set up the workout, because it's setting you up either to fail or to never push yourself to get better.
Yeah, and that's I actually have some great screenshots. We do a AMA meetup with all our coaching athletes at least once a month, and so I have actually like a bunch for this to show them on screenshots of the person using ERG, and it looks perfect. But then what they're missing out on is that I have examples from other athletes who are doing the same workout, but in manual, and you'll see like it looks similarly perfect. It's a little messier line, but you'll see they take like a little extra recovery, but then they are hitting the last couple intervals. They're like hitting the top of the zone. So they've said, oh, I can like finish this workout at the top of the zone. And so they're getting more time towards the top. Right. But then they're also taking recoveries here, and they're like, you can see how they've like strategized throughout the workout. But it looks like, again, because when you look at the whole workout, the squiggly lines really smooth out, because you're not looking at like 260 for this 1 second. You're looking at.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it turns out that the perfect workout is actually a very imperfect workout.
Well, I think you're missing those chances. Like, those are all little decisions, like pacing things, right? Like the one example is like the person like surges and like really it goes over the zone to finish this workout on like, say, the second last interval or third last interval, but then they have to take a bit more recovery, and then they finish the workout like, okay. But you can see like how they like maybe learned a bit about like, oh, that's why you don't want to go that much harder. right? And so in a race now, are they going to be able to take that experience of, steady, 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 don't like empty the tank quite yet? Or are they going to learn that when they do have to go that deep, that it's not the end of the world? They just like have to take a bit of a breather and then come back on and perform again, right? So that's like all these things that like maybe you don't learn if you're just steady right in the center of every single zone for every workout.
Right. So if you're someone who's in erg mode, it just might be time to redefine what success in a workout actually looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. With that, hit us up with any more questions, trainer or not trainer related. Happy training, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.